I mention this because today is Vision Sunday, a day where we talk about our church's values and goals and how they might shape what we do here at Turramurra United Church over the next 12 months. I used this picture on the screen last year where I sort of talked about how Vision Sunday is a bit like a rudder on a boat. It just helps everything that we do, which here in this church is quite diverse, to sort of head in a similar direction. Not necessarily all do the same thing, but to head in a similar direction. Vision Sunday helps us as a church keep moving forward. Now, Vision Sunday is something that I get very excited about. I'm hoping some of my enthusiasm might rub off on all of you as well. Before I get into the vision part of this talk, I wanted to link it in with what we've been doing with the Bible reading and our narrative through the Gospel of Mark, because God has got an interesting way of weaving things together, and the Bible reading, which was set a long time ago for this Sunday, actually fits in really well with what we're talking about. So you might remember last time I preached on the Gospel of Mark, I showed you this slide, and I talked about the importance of a particular passage in Mark. I said everything from the first 8 chapters sort of builds up to this first, to this pivotal verse, and then everything after that heads towards the cross and the resurrection. I said it's a pivotal, critical verse. We get to it today. Today was that passage. And so I sort of said these first 8 chapters of Mark are all about people trying to work out, who is this Jesus person? You know, he's someone who teaches with authority. He can heal people. He can, sort of be in touch with God. You know, or even when the disciples said, who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? Who is this person? They've been trying to work it out for 8 chapters. And we get to this pivotal passage, and Jesus asks, who do people say that I am? It sort of sums up everything that's happened so far. Who do they say that I am? They don't really know. The people don't really know. Some think that he could be John the Baptist reincarnated. Remember, he got beheaded a little while back. Some people think that he's a prophet like Elijah or a great teacher, or they don't know. They don't know. They can't work it out. And so then Jesus changes the question to the pivotal verse in the gospel and asks the disciples, but what about you? Who do you say that I am? This is it. And Peter steps up and makes his declaration, you are the Messiah. You are the one. You are the one who has come to save us, to reconnect us back to God. You're it. You are the Messiah. And I think that when Peter makes this declaration, it should have been a bit like Christmas Eve when the Spirit meter hit the top. And what happened? We all cheered, and there were streamers going off, and I could just imagine when Peter says this, a big banner falls down behind them all saying, Jesus is the Messiah, and they're all celebrating. It should have been like that, shouldn't it? Because this is it. Peter got it right. He's worked it out. But instead, this reading pivots in a completely different way. In an unexpected way. As soon as Peter makes his declaration, what does Jesus do? Okay, don't tell anybody else about this, because the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the chief priests and religious leaders, and be killed. What? What just happened here? We know this is a pivotal verse, but we were not expecting to pivot in this way. Neither was Peter, because Peter actually, as Cam talked about in his kids' talk, pulls Jesus aside and goes, are you sure? Is this really where you want to go from this point? And then Peter and Jesus says that weird line, get behind me, Satan. So in 30 seconds, Peter's gone from being the top of the class of working out that Jesus is indeed the Messiah to suddenly, 4 verses later, Jesus saying, get behind me, Satan. This is not the pivot we were expecting. How are we supposed to understand this? I actually think that there's two keys that help unlock this passage. And I just want to go through them very quickly because I actually think it helps us unlock the vision that we've been trying to discern for 2024 in this church as well. The first key actually comes just before the passage. Actually, if I had more time, I would have started the passage a little bit earlier because I think they all link together. So if you've got your Bible on your phone and you go back to Mark 8:22, which is about 5 verses before we started, there's a story about Jesus meeting a man at Bethsaida and places his hands upon him to be healed. And Jesus asks this blind man, all right, I've placed my hands on you. What can you see? And this person goes, I can sort of see. I can see people, but they don't look like people. How would a blind man know what people should like? Anyway, but he said, they don't look like people. They look like trees. So what does Jesus do? Tries again. You know how I said the other week that there's not many stories about Jesus' healings not working? Here's one of the few ones that it didn't work properly the first time. And so he tries again, and then the person says, I can see clearly now. He could see everything clearly. So how does that passage link with what Peter just did? I just wonder when Peter made that declaration, you are the Messiah, you are the one. Peter was beginning to see the bigger picture and to understand what God was trying to do through Jesus in the world. But maybe he hadn't got it all quite yet. He was only seeing things, but maybe a bit blurry. And so Jesus then had to go, well, let me help you see clearly. And took that a step further by saying, if you want to understand what it means for me to be the Messiah, then, the Son of Man must suffer. I'm heading towards the cross. And if you want to follow me, then you must pick up your own cross. You must be on this journey too. Help me to let you see this more clearly. Not just like people walking around like trees, but clearly what it means to declare me as the Messiah. That sort of makes sense? Maybe there's part of it that pivot that seems so harsh is actually Jesus going, let me to help you understand more what this actually means. We're not told what the disciples' response to this is when Jesus gives us all this quite direct teaching. I can imagine they've already been struggling to understand who Jesus is and the implications of what it meant to follow Jesus. And then Jesus adds this to it. And maybe they were feeling a bit overwhelmed or unsure or inadequate. Okay, you want us to pick up our cross and follow you. How do we even start with that? What do we do here? And I think the end of the passage we had is the second key that might be helpful in unlocking this passage, but also unlocking our vision. The transfiguration of Jesus, where Peter and James and John head off into this mountaintop where they have this experience of seeing Jesus glorified. Now, the best we could give it is having that experience where we feel like we are so rich in the presence of God. That it's maybe a moment of worship or maybe another experience where we just feel, wow, this is so real surrounding us at the moment. We can feel God here. We can see the glory surrounding us. Jesus invites the disciples to step into this place and to experience God in that place. And in that moment, God actually answers the who do you say that I am question. Because God goes, do you want me to answer my answer is, this is my son, whom I love. That's who he is. He's my son. And then in that moment of deep worship and experiencing the glory of God, God gives the disciples a hint of how to start that journey. How do I pick up my cross and follow Jesus? What does that mean? He gives a very simple piece of advice. What does he say in that moment of deep worship? Here is my son whom I love. Listen to him. Listen to him. Simple yet profound, isn't it? Just listen to him. And that is what Kevin and I and Church Council have been humbly doing, really, for the last couple of months of last year and into the beginning of this year. We've been attempting to listen to Jesus as we have been trying to work out, where are we heading as a church? What is God calling us to do in 2024? We've been prayerfully asking God to reveal the vision to us and the direction that might be helpful for us to head as a church as we move forward together. And in your Vision Sunday flyer, you will get to see what we have been discerning. One of the things that we started with was we did a church-wide vision in 2022, which all of us were involved in that process of discerning. And one of the first things we did as a ministry team, as a church council, was affirm those 5 focus areas that we identified in 2022, and affirm that, yes, indeed, God is still calling us to focus or place extra investment or energy or resources into these 5 areas. So faith and discipleship, growing young, pastoral care and connections, small groups and support, and being better neighbours, or community connections, however you want to understand that. But they are pretty broad, aren't they? They almost cover everything that we do in the life of the church. So sometimes we go, all right, well, yes, indeed, God is calling us to focus on these areas. But as we head into these next 12 months, is there anything in particular that would be helpful for God to guide us to focus on in particular? What might God be wanting us to be investing in 2024? Now, Kevin's going to give his answer. He would have loved to have been here, but he's down at St Andrews this morning. He's going to give his answer via video in a moment, but I would like to share some of my ponderings before we get to that. As I prayed and discerned, a word and a picture emerged for me. The word that emerged was growth, and the picture was that of a tree. See, 6 years ago when I was called to be the minister here, one of the things that was clearly passed on to me when I was coming here was that the church council at the time felt that God was calling the church into a time of growth. And if you remember those first couple of years, we actually saw that come to life as we invested in that. And that vision came alive. There was growth numerically, there was growth in energy and engagement, and there was growth in our outreach. Unfortunately, COVID changed that a bit. It took away some of the momentum, and over the last 2 or 3 years, our focus has been more about re-establishing connection, and also in there has come this strong calling of what does it mean to be a lighthouse church. But I don't know, when I was sitting there praying, I was feeling that God was saying, I think it's time to refocus again on growth. And in 2024, we should be looking at these 5 keys that we have already identified with a particular focus of what does it mean to grow in these 5 areas? What does it mean to maybe have some numerical growth? Or what does it mean to say we've got spiritual growth in these areas? Or growth in the feeling of connection and community? And where does the picture of the tree fit into all of this? Well, trees grow. Actually, I think it's slightly more than that. I don't know, when I was focusing in my prayers, this picture of the tree was really helpful to me because I was imagining well, in a sense, the tree was helping make the vision sharper, a little bit like Jesus and the blind man. I was imagining this tree with these huge branches that were reaching out beyond the church to our local community and making a difference and being fruitful out there. But as this tree reached out, I was going, well, unless the trunk is solid, then these trees are just going to snap off and not be any help. And so if the trees are going to reach out, then we need to make sure the core of the tree or the trunk is strong. But also you've got the roots in there as well. And well, if we start there, we need to make sure that our roots are deep in Jesus. One of the things I love about this church is that we are a Jesus-centric church. We say and we try to make sure that everything that we do is got the foundation of Jesus, is built on Jesus, includes Jesus, and is all about Jesus. That's what we're on about here. And so we're this Jesus-centric church. And in a sense, that's our making sure our roots are deep in Jesus. I want to remind you of that and encourage you with these words from Colossians 2:6. So I've got the one on the screen is the New Living Translation. And now, just as you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord, you must continue to follow him. Let your roots grow down into Jesus and let your lives be built on him. Then your faith will grow strong in truth and in the truth you were taught, and you will overflow with thanksgiving. If we want to make sure that our vision is growing this year, then we need to make sure that our roots are deep in Jesus. But I also think that part of that is making sure, as I said before, that the trunk of the tree or the core of what we do is strong. And so I think that part of the vision is actually about strengthening the core of the tree as well, to make sure that we as a church family are spiritually strong and are helping each other to spiritually grow. It's making sure that we as a church family are striving to care and support and love each other, and that all who are connected here feel love and support and part of this community. If we're doing that, we're strengthening the core. Is this making sense, or is this... I'm just going to take that as a nod and keep going. And if we strengthen our core, we have this sense that if we start reaching out further and start growing those branches further out into our local community as a lighthouse church, if we continue to grow young as we started that journey last year with that Growing Young program, if we continue to be a lighthouse church and grow out, if our core, our trunk is strong, then we can do that. And so, that third part about reaching out into our local community, being a lighthouse church. I've got to say, I had the most magnificent idea for folding your document that I can show you the draft if you want, that you folded it out and the trunk became wide and you pulled these apart and the two... It was brilliant. It was going to take me too long. Anyway, so that's the picture that we had. That's the picture that I was having, that in 2024 we should be looking at these 5 key areas and how we might grow. Is this resonating with you? Is this sort of working? So how do we bring this vision to life? And this is the tricky part of this sort of talk, because if I ask the question, what are some practical ideas of how we move our church forward? Or what's some ideas that we have to stimulate this growth through strengthening our core or growing young or reaching out? Like, we get excited about the bigger picture. I certainly get excited about the bigger picture, about what God is calling us to do. But when we start to get to the practical details, we suddenly feel a little bit overwhelmed. Or maybe you feel like a little bit me with my idea of the folding. It was a great idea, but I just didn't have the time. I didn't have the capacity to pull it off. I've got these ideas, but I can't do them. It's too hard. And so we look at this big picture vision, we get excited, and we go, how do we pull this off? We're all a bit feeling like we're already reaching our capacity. and yet God's calling us to take another step forward. What do we do here? So in the light of this, I wondered whether Vision Sunday might be more fruitful if we, well, instead of what we normally do, which is propose a list of ideas of things that we could do to bring this vision to life, instead of doing that, that we instead just offer some prompting questions to you. You know where you're at the moment. You know your capacity. You're all part of different groups or mission areas in the life of the church, or ministry areas in the life of the church. Why don't we just ask you how you think that we could bring this to life? How we might together come up with some ideas. And it sort of makes sense, because if we're wanting to take another step forward in the life of the church, ultimately it's not me who does that. It's the people involved in the different groups and mission or ministry areas who do that. So if you're coming up with the ideas of something that you think is practical, achievable, and something you're excited about, then it's more likely that you would do it. So that's where Kevin and I have worked on 5 broad questions to help us all reflect on Vision 24. And not all of these questions will be relevant to every group, but we're hoping they might prompt 1 or 2 small things that we might be able to do to take another step forward in bringing this vision to life. And you've already seen the questions, because by now you would have undoubtedly read the brochure sitting in church. And so I don't necessarily have to read them out again, but I do have them here, and I'll explain where they are coming from. So we came up with 5 questions, but because I was involved, I couldn't help myself, and some of the questions have got multiple parts. So yes, you could argue there are more than 5 questions. But they're just trying to say, what's one small thing that we could do in your groups, in your mission areas, in your ministry areas, or even by ourselves, that might just take that little step forward. But these questions fit in with the other parts of the vision that we've talked about. What's one small thing we might do to increase numerically the number of people connected to our group? If we're talking about growth, that literally is what growth is about. What's one small thing that we might be able to do to help people spiritually grow in our groups or ministry areas? What's something that we might be able to do to help people connect more in their relationship with Jesus? What's one small thing that we could do to take another step to increasing that sense of love and care and support of the people in our groups? I'm not asking you to solve everything. I think God's just saying, what's the next step? Let's keep moving forward. Let's keep the momentum going. What's the next step? Kevin did some thinking of this, and as I said, he couldn't be here today because he's down at St Andrews. But I asked him, you got to speak at Vision Sunday. So I've got a small video here that we're going to hear from Kevin on him reflecting on this. Can we play the video?
Hi everyone, I'm hoping Vision Sunday Worship 2024 is encouraging and stimulating you to think about our plans, our goals and direction over the next 12 months. As is in this amazing booklet, under the strengthening our core areas, there are 3 questions to examine how we can stimulate growth in our ministry. How do we strengthen our core areas through nurturing faith, community, and connections? And I have some idea for particular question 3 to strengthen and deepen the sense of community for the young families within Life of Talk. I'm planning to start young families small group this year. As I have already spoken with a few young families, we know that this is an age group, the group that we need more investment, and age group that we need to invest more time and energy. And if we can strengthen our connection with young families, we believe it will bring a sustainable growth for the kids' church and children's ministry. So please share with me any ideas. If you have any ideas to develop young families, small group within in the life of Turramurra Uniting Church, please come and talk to me. If you want to support that plan as a team, I would welcome any ideas and suggestions. Blessings to you all. Thank you.
Did you see what Kevin was doing there? Just trying to work out what's another step. Doesn't have to be big. What's a step that we could take to further this mission? The other two questions are similar, just under the different headings. So the Growing Young Prompted question is all about building on the work we started last year through the Growing Young program. And it's just saying, how do we encourage people who are younger than us? How do we encourage those intergenerational connections and conversations? As I said, they might not be relevant to every group, but they are good questions to ask. All groups to ask the questions. Likewise, in the reaching out to our local community question is a good one to consider. How do we strengthen those bridges that we have beyond the life of the church? Whether that's our connections into the local community or our work that we are doing through being a lighthouse church. Part of your answers might be to align with something that's already happening. Like in this question here, you might go, we can continue to reach out by aligning our group with what we're already doing with carols or something like that. That makes sense. You don't have to start everything from scratch. But it's thinking about what can we do to take that next step forward. And who knows, God might stir within your group or ministry area a completely left field idea that no one's really thought about before, that you might go, well, we could give that a try. One of my giftings is that I like being an ideas person. And these questions prompt so many ideas for me. But it was almost like God saying, you just pause for a moment, Phil. You don't need to be the one who comes up for all the ideas in the life of the church. Let the groups and the ministry areas have a go. And so I'm pausing and letting you guys have that discussion. While saying that, I'm more than happy to come along and be part of that discussion if you'd like me to, because I do get excited by these sort of things. But I do encourage us all to reflect upon these questions and see what God stirs within you, what might emerge. And if something happens, well then, you don't have to come back to me or to Kevin or to church council. If it's your group having an idea of something that your group can do, then I empower your group just to do it. We would love to get some feedback, what you're thinking, just so that we can keep the rest of the church informed and excited, especially if things are happening. We would love to be able to feed that back. You might see on the back of the flyer a little timetable there that we want to be having some of these conversations, but we actually want to get on and do some of these ideas so that at the July AGM meeting we can do a report of how this is going. Has this been a helpful process? As I said, I do get excited about Vision Sunday. I have no idea how long I've been going because I left my phone down there. But it probably is time that I should stop. So let me finish with a question, with a challenge, and with an encouragement that Jesus gave his disciples in our Bible reading. But because we too are followers of Jesus and we too are disciples, that these questions and challenges and encouragement are for us too. So Jesus said, "Who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am?" I really do pray that each one of us may know that Jesus is indeed the Messiah, that Jesus is our Saviour, that Jesus is the one who is here to help us. Jesus gave a challenge. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. May we commit anew to this today. That Jesus calls us to be his disciples. invites us to follow him. May we commit to following Jesus, commit to be part of this vision, commit to being part of the community of Christ that shows love and care and support to each other. And lastly, Jesus gave some encouragement where Jesus invited us to draw close to God. Just like the disciples in the Transfiguration, come close. Come close. Experience His glory in your lives. Experience this closeness of the presence of God in worship. Come close. And as we come close, God will speak to us. This one that you are following, this one that you have committed to, this, God says, is my Son whom I love. Listen to him. May that be true for us in our church. Amen.